Tony Smith is former head of the UK Border Force and joins me now. Tony, what's your reaction?
Well, I suspect it's the same as yours and many other people's, Peter, and that is disappointment, really. I think that the people of Epping were quite jubilant, weren't they, last week when they'd heard that they'd won in court. But as we know, the judicial system winds on, and eventually, in my experience, as you creep up the judicial system in this country, then human rights tend to take precedence. So I'm not at all surprised that the judges found in favour of the Home Office, and I wouldn't be at all surprised come October if they find in favour of the Home Office again, on the basis that irregular migrants arriving at our shores are entitled not to suffer inhuman and degrading treatment under Article 3 of the ECHR, and therefore we have an obligation to house them. And it's a bit of a jump to say we've got to put them in 4-star hotels from there, but that's the current policy, Peter, I'm afraid.
There has been widespread condemnation of this. It has also been welcomed by Lisa Foster. She is of Richard Buxton Solicitors, which represents Somani Hotels, which owns the Bell Hotel. We are pleased that the Court of Appeal has ruled that the injunction should not have been granted by the High Court. Our clients realise that they have been caught in the middle of a much wider debate on the treatment of asylum seekers, and respectfully ask that members of the public understand that the Bell Hotel has simply been providing a contracted service that the government requires. I really hope that if there are any protests tonight, they stay completely peaceful. If people lose their rag, if they break the law, well, that completely undermines their argument. But there is a lot of anger. I can see a nearly full switchboard here. I can see hundreds of messages coming in to this station this afternoon on this. There is real anger here, Tony. What does the government do next?
Well, I think they're in some difficulty here, Peter, because of their stance on the European Convention of Human Rights, and we've spoken about this before. I think we do need to do something about the ECHR. I can tell you I was in the department 25 years ago when this all began, asylum support, and it was because we had vast numbers of people arriving in Dover. We didn't have enough detention accommodation. They didn't have any bail addresses. They were just being granted into the community. And again, we were challenged in law to say, well, you can't do that. You've got to provide accommodation. And that's when the asylum support system sprang up and the Home Office started to talk to local councils about where are we going to put people. That's just mushroomed over the last 20 years to this point where hotels, which were only ever meant to be a temporary measure, have now, captured the national interest to the point where people are saying, well, it's not on. But what they will continue to say, Peter, and they will continue to argue in court, is that they have an obligation under Article 3 of the ECHR to house asylum seekers. We need to challenge that and say, well, does it go that far? I mean, inhuman and degrading treatment. What about the asylum seekers in France who are camped out in the woods in Calais? What if you go to a number of European capitals where you will find asylum seekers not placed in hotels? In Germany, they built purpose-built prefabs to place asylum seekers. We are the only country I know of that goes so far as to say that in order to meet our obligations under the ECHR, we have to provide hotel accommodation in our communities. And I think that's a real problem for the government. And I'd really like to know, as you say, well, how are they going to decant them? And where are they going to decant them to, given that the Prime Minister seems to think there's vast amounts of accommodation?
Oh, there's no problem with social housing in this country, according to Keir Starmer. That's what he said. That's how in touch he is with this country, that he doesn't think there's a problem with social housing. I mean, it's completely crazy. Tony, thank you. That's Tony Smith there, former head of the UK Border Force. Margaret in Birmingham says, what a one-sided decision. He blames Epping Council, the previous judge who should complain to the powers that be. He blamed the protest. This judge today was not interested in this case. Cooper and Starmer should resign. They hate the British people. That is disgraceful, says Margaret in Birmingham. Emma says, afternoon, Peter. Well, after that ruling, we all know where we stand now and how the government thinks of this country and the people. It absolutely stinks, says Emma. I want to speak to a human rights lawyer, Mark Stevens, now. Mark, is your argument, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is your argument simply that the government had no alternative here because of the European Convention on Human Rights?
No, I think as a lawyer or a judge, you have to strip away the hubris and the politics. And once you do that, this is a fairly straightforward case. And every thinking lawyer I know expected this outcome. There's a couple of factors that you have to take into account. This was a planning law case. It wasn't a human rights case. It touches on human rights, but it was actually a planning law case. And Epping Council have, for the past 3 years, allowed this hotel, with planning permission, to house asylum seekers in the hotel. They haven't taken any enforcement action. and so the hotel has undertaken a commercial contract. The hotel, of their own volition, got in touch with the council and said, do we need to sort of reclassify as a hostel, or are we okay as a hotel? The Epping Council ignored them for a year and then snapped this case on them. Now, the reality is that, the bull question here is, what's the difference between a hotel and a hostel? I accept that people may want people to go into hostels rather than hotels, but the fundamental difference that you have to consider as a lawyer and someone listening is, what is the difference between a hotel and a hostel? And the answer, as a matter of law, is that a hotel provides private rooms and services and prioritises some level of comfort and privacy, whereas a hostel is shared dormitory-style lodging in communal areas, affording. So
what's wrong with that, Mark? What's wrong with,
absolutely nothing. But you might think that the Bell Hotel, the clue is in the name, that it's a hotel, and therefore it's entitled to do what it's doing. And if you want to move them to hostels, that's absolutely fine. That won't infringe their human rights. But we don't appear to have the wherewithal to do that. But this narrow point that the judges considered today, is it a hotel or is it a hostel? And because any thinking person is going to say it's a hotel, it's got private rooms within it, and therefore it's within the planning law, it's a permitted activity. Epping Council permitted this activity at this location. They gave the permission. So trying to come along and say, now actually we need an injunction, was always doomed to failure. And I'll make a further prediction, because the point of law is so very narrow, they're going to lose in 7 weeks' time, and they'll be wasting public funds for the people of Epping.
So you actually think the council is wasting public funds by going a step further with this, because they're just not going to win?
They're just not going to win. This is a hopeless, hapless case. And, if I were their lawyers, I'd be absolutely chuffed as ninepence to be getting 20 guineas an hour or whatever it is. But actually, it's a waste of local taxpayers' money. The question here is, can you comply with the human rights point is, can you comply with human rights by putting people into either purpose-built prefabs or into hostels? And the answer to that is, by and large, yes, you can do that. So you can lower the cost if you have the hostels. And there's no actual need to put them into a hotel, 4-star, 3-star, 1-star. Doesn't matter. But that isn't the narrative which is around this. So as a lawyer, I look at this very much on the facts of the case. I see Epping Council having done nothing for 3 years, for having actually not engaged in a consultation.
Okay.
And I look at the facts of it. Is it a hotel? Is it a hostel? Well, it's pretty obviously a hotel.
Mark, thank you for that. That's Mark Stevens, a human rights lawyer